Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and the second video in my brand new series on Zatanna Zatara, our favorite stage magician slash sorcerer slash superhero in the DC universe. Today we are going to be talking about the new 52 Justice League Dark run, specifically the first trade paperback, which is called Justice League Dark in the Dark. I ran a Twitter poll a couple weeks ago asking people whether they would rather me start with the New 52 run or the current ongoing Rebirth run, and people voted for the New 52, so here we are. So for a lot of these comics I'm talking about, like I mentioned in my previous video, Zatanna isn't a character who often gets the spotlight in the sense that she doesn't get a lot of solo issues. She gets a lot of team-up stories instead. So how we're going to approach that is whenever we're doing a comic book like this, I'm going to run by the general story with you, the characters, who's involved, and then we're going to zero in on Zatanna's character, her role, the portrayal of her relationships with the other characters in the book, and then we'll get a better picture of her in context and be able to talk about all the fun details of our favorite magician. So the Justice League Dark is a fairly new team in the grand scheme and the grand history of DC Comics. The New 52 run is really when it first took off. And for me, it was actually the first time learning about all of these other occult characters in the DC universe. And that's kind of how I fell in love with this magical, mystical side of DC instead of just focusing on the typical superheroes such as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. So this bad boy was published in 2011, and the creative team behind it is Peter Milligan, who does the writing, and Michael Janin as the artist, credited on the cover. You gotta look inside the cover for the rest of the creative team. Ulysses Areola as the colorist, Rob Lay as the letterer, Ryan Sook as the collection cover artist, and Ryan and Michael as the original series cover artists. So what happens in Justice League Dark in the Dark? The main villain of this story is Enchantress. So she's basically a very powerful witch, and she has this dual side of her who is this very sweet young woman called June Moore, but the two of them had been separated, and we don't really know much about what had happened to them because this is the whole mystery behind it. But as a result of their separation, Enchantress grows more and more unstable, and her powers are threatening to take over the world, the whole shebang. And June Moore is kind of being haunted by her ghosts. And we have Madame Xanadu, who is a powerful clairvoyant, seer. Her whole thing is seeing the future. She looks into her tarot cards, and she knows too much for her own good. She envisions a future in which Enchantress destroys the world with her powers, and so she creates a super team of her own to fight these threats. And let's roll the introduction reel, and I'm gonna go through all of the characters who you see here, the main ones at least. So you have Madame Xanadu, June Moore, the Enchantress, Shade the Changing Man, Dead Man, also known as Boston Brand, John Constantine, Zatanna Zatara, and there's a little cameo by Dove from like Hawk and Dove, but she's not that important yet, and we're not going to talk about the overall story too much, but that's just for your information. And it's a great idea assembling a team of occult superheroes as opposed to our classic Justice League team, because it seems to have been really successful since its launch in 2011. We get the Rebirth series still ongoing and doing really well, and we also get the animated films. So that's the basic premise of the team, and I'm going to run you by what Zatanna specifically does in this comic. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about something much more direct and something much more immediate. We're going to talk about Zatanna's brand new look in this comic. The Justice League Dark comics, especially this new 52 run, is when they really kicked off Zatanna's gothic princess look. As opposed to her typical stage magician outfit, this one is much more down to earth, much more grungy, in theme with the tone of the comic and its darker elements, its grittier elements, shall you say, even though I hate using that word nowadays. It sets a great foundation for her current look and Rebirth, which is personally my favorite. Her introduction to the comic is a scene with her talking to Batman, where they discuss the incoming threats and what is going on with June Moore and the Enchantress, because Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg had gone on the offensive to try to attack the Enchantress, but it had kind of torn them all apart. Zatanna is a trusted member of the Justice League. She is part of Bruce's inner circle because they've always been portrayed as really good friends, sometimes even childhood friends, for example, in Paul Dini's run. And clearly, the two of them share a really good history there between one another as professionals, as friends. There's a nice moment in here when Bruce and Zatanna are talking about the viability of her facing these threats. And Bruce says, "Do you really think it'll be that easy, Zatanna, when Superman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg all failed?" And Zatanna says, "Easy? No, but possible, because this is my territory. Spells, hocus pocus, demons, it's meat and drink to me." And you see a little smile on Bruce's face, and so it's just like this very sweet relationship that the two of them have. But even then, it doesn't come without its hitches because Bruce insists on coming along with her to this new adventure, but Zatanna's just like, "No, this isn't your world, and Gotham needs you. You need to be out here with these other criminals running around loose." And she casts a spell on him, binding his feet to the ground so he doesn't follow her. And he is, understandably a little bit upset about this. And there's a really interesting comment he makes as she walks away, telling her that, "Zatanna, you're not stable enough to handle Enchantress on your own." And we don't really know what that means or what he's implying by that. How does he know that she's not stable right now? All of these questions are unfortunately not yet answered in this comic, but I'm hoping to find them in the next volume. See, what I like about Zatanna's character, as demonstrated in this little interaction, is that she is the type of hero, the type of person who clearly has a lot going on her plate. She's the bridge between the Justice League Dark and the Justice League, the world of superheroics and the world of the occult, of man and magic. And therefore, she always has to make a lot of difficult decisions, but she always sticks with them. She doesn't waver on her decisions. There are a lot of superheroes that like to think and ponder about the consequences. And, it's this huge burden, I would understand, of having to make these difficult decisions. But Zatanna's a character who just goes ahead and does it. And that's kind of reflective in her magic as well. She doesn't cast long and winding rhyming spells, for instance. She casts stuff like bind his feet, go away, freeze, and that's like the immediacy of her character translated into the type of magic she wields. We're going to jump ahead in the story a little bit to illustrate my point. When Shade the Changing Man loses control of his powers, and his powers are kind of reality-based, he can warp reality as he chooses, but that sometimes overtakes him and he can't really find himself in all of that again. So there's a moment where he imagines his dead girlfriend who he had conjured up himself. So this dead girlfriend was never real in the first place. But the world is ending, they're trying to face Enchantress, bad things are happening, and he can't tell what's real, what's not, can't get a grip on himself. And Zatanna just goes ahead, finds him in this huge storm of like teeth and disgusting magical things, tries to cast a spell on him to ignore these illusions he's having. She says, "You can't resist my enchantment, Shade. It's not just the backward spells, it's pitch, tone, confidence." And she goes backwards. "Shade, ignore him." See, another example of the simplicity of her spells. You can just tell people to do what they want, no fancy business. And Shade is still a little bit distracted. He's just like, hold up, I still need to talk to her. I'm so sorry, I treated her so badly, I left her." And Zatanna's just like, "Oh, poor idiot, the guilt and pain are too deep for my magic. I have to try something radical here." Okay, deep breath, and then she kisses him. And then she says, "You want to know what real is? It's that taste on your lips, that memory of my tongue pushing between your teeth. That's as real as it gets, mister." And that was like a fun little scene that kind of shows how much of a quick thinker Zatanna is. She's creative, and even though she has this magic, she knows she can't always rely on it. And if she's a person that's very direct and grounded in the reality of situations, like of course she would make a choice to bring someone back to reality in the simplest way she knows how, by just kissing him, showing him that physicality of the moment, I'm real, you're real, she's not. She has a couple other moments like this where her magic doesn't quite work the way it's supposed to. For example, when she's facing Enchantress for the first time, she tries to take her on by herself, but that doesn't work, and she's smart enough to retreat when it doesn't. She tries to cast spells at her, but Enchantress's magic is overpowering her very quickly and very clearly. And I thought it was interesting that the color of her magic here is red, because in a lot of the other comics it's usually like this light bluish color. So I found that striking revisiting this comic after the longest time. So finally, we're going to talk about the relationship between Zatanna and John Constantine, which is a fixed point in a lot of the DC universe. John Constantine has become one of my favorite characters over the years, and I think I first learned about him in the Justice League Dark, actually, so I was really intrigued as to what his backstory was, read the old Vertigo Hellblazer comics, but I really like his relationship with Zatanna for many reasons. It's imperfect and it's messy, and the two of them have so much problems between one another. But they're ultimately trying to do the right thing in the end, and there's an intimacy there between them that doesn't come around often. And these two characters, I feel that Zatanna, she often hangs around alone. You know, as popular as she is, as likable as she is by other members of the League, for example, and she seems like a normal person for the most part, compared to a lot of these other characters. But she kind of faces the darkness as a part of her everyday, and John Constantine is someone who has a lot of experience in that, and their backstory gets explored a little more in the second issue, which is Books of Magic, but we're not going to talk about that yet. So their portrayal in the Dark is kind of like estranged exes, basically. And Zatanna clearly has a lot of problems with him. When Xanadu first brings him on the team, she's just like, oh god, not you again, John. And she's clearly tired of all his escapades. But there's a nice moment in the beginning of the book when Zatanna, when she first tries to figure out what's going on with the Enchantress, she gets stuck in this trance in the middle of the street. When she sees a vision of the city being destroyed, she's kind of just sat there meditating, stuck in her mind, while a group of people and like an ambulance are standing around her, and they're just like, what's up with this weird chick? Is she dead? She's not breathing. I can't really find her pulse. And John Constantine walks in through the crowd, and he's just like, all right, I'll handle this. She's fine. Trust me. And he uses a little bit of her backwards magic on her. So he tells her, wake up, backwards speech, and she does. And further along in the comic, she asks him, how did you do that? How did you learn my backwards magic? And John's just like, picked up a couple spells from the last time we were together. You know, you tend to talk in your sleep sometimes, and you're a very dangerous woman to be in bed with. And Zatanna's not very happy about that. She's just like, John, give it back. I'm gonna erase them from your mind. Like, you can't have my magic. And he just kind of flees before she gets the chance to do that. And there's also this bit where they're doing tantric magic together, which I still don't understand, and I couldn't explain to you if I tried, so I'm just going to leave that panel up here for you to figure out what's going on. So I like the fact that John is a really interesting foil to her character in a lot of ways, and the amount of history they have between them is super interesting to read about. And apart from that, I think that is all the Zatanna content we get. We get flashes of her alluding to what happened to her father. So her father kind of dies slash disappears before this comic happens, and the fact is John is somehow responsible for that. We don't know how. That's probably why she's a little mad at him. I think the answer is going to be in the second volume, The Books of Magic. I had a brief glance through it yesterday, but this is a recurring thing in a lot of Zatanna stories, her losing her father. So as we know, she grew up without her mother, Cindella, who is this mysterious witch who disappears because of different reasons, depending on who's writing her. And the fact is, her relationship with her father is incredibly sweet. She has such a good relationship with him. as portrayed in the House of Secrets comic, which is a children's comic book, but I think that sets such a good foundation for their dynamics and what it was like for her learning magic as a child from her father, who also does his backward speech and is an acclaimed magician, superhero, sorcerer, you name it. And I think that is all the Zatanna content from this comic book. Let me know if you picked up anything else, leave them in the comments, we can discuss them, and let me know if you have read the new 52 Justice League Dark series, and what did you think of them? Have you revisited them in a while? I know I haven't. I think it's been like 3-4 years since I last read it, so it's nice to come back to it. My next video will focus on Volume 2, the Books of Magic, and let me know what other Zatanna appearances you would like me to talk about, whether it's a whole run of comics like this one, or a single issue appearance, or a TV episode. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next, and I'll see when I can slot them in. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye guys! Have a great week!